ahead and call the meeting to order. Kelly, you want to call roll?
Will do. Beiersdorf,
Here.
DiLorenzo,
Here.
Hanley,
Here.
Ingraham,
Here.
Jacobs is excused, Samirsky is excused, Wallach.
Here. Okay. Reports from staff. Do we have any?
Thank you. Yeah, just two quick things tonight. So you do have an addendum. This was emailed out. Addendum is related to business item 7A, which is the Purgatory Park Master Plan, information that we received after the distribution of the packet on Friday. So that's information that we received over the weekend and early this week. And then second thing, just a friendly reminder, mics here, just make sure they're green when you're talking and close to your mouth so we can hear it for the audio. And that's all I have. Thank you.
Okay, great. So moving on to approval of minutes from our December meeting. Does anybody have any comments or any motions?
No, it was the same meeting I was at. I would move to approve the minutes.
Do we have a second?
I'll second.
You want to take roll?
Beiersdorf,
Approve.
DiLorenzo,
Approve.
Hanley,
Approve.
Ingraham,
Approve.
and Wallach.
Approve. Okay. So tonight we're going to talk about the Purgatory Park and the dogs. But do we have any people wishing to discuss items not on the agenda? Okay. If I'm reading this correct, we have no special matters.
Correct.
Okay. So let's move on to the business items.
Sounds good. Thank you, Chair. Business item 7A is the Purgatory Park Master Plan, the preliminary strategies regarding dogs. And Matt is going to take that.
Thank you very much. I'm going to start by walking us through a little reminder of how we got to this stage in the process, presenting again some of the feedback summary data that we received so far, talk through the timeline of the process ongoing, and then include some essentially discussion points for you folks to have a conversation on this particular issue. So a little bit of the background, coming out of the POST plan, the Parks Open Space and Trails Plan. This is a 15 to 20 year roadmap for parks improvements. This helps us identify prioritization in terms of improvement to park spaces. And this process led to a series of park master plans, the first undertaking being Purgatory Park, one of our biggest, most significant parks. So throughout this year, staff hired a consultant, Bolton & Mank, park planning consultant, and we performed a variety of outreach and engagement opportunities for folks in the community to provide us feedback about how they use the park, why they use the park, how often they use the park, what they love about the park, what they hate about the park, etc. That process wrapped up in mid-October here. On December 6th, a month ago, I presented to you a summary of the feedback, and I have some of that included in the presentation tonight to aid in the conversation. Tonight, what I'd like to present is some early preliminary strategy options. This is based on the conversation from a month ago, and we have some figures and sort of a staged timeline to walk through, and again, really to facilitate that conversation as best as possible. As of now, the plan is, if everything goes smoothly, to make a draft master plan available for full public comment. This is dog-related issues. Every particular is related to the Purgatory Park Master Plan, making that available in the next several weeks. This would be available for full public comment on the Minnetonka Matters page for a month, and then bringing those results of the feedback we received after that process back to you folks for comment, further review, and then finally engaging in the final design of that master plan document. So currently that would have us presenting the final master plan in March, the March meeting. And then after that process, if you folks were to recommend it to City Council for adoption. So again, we talked through last month sort of a phased strategy of and working with the consultants, we divided that into short and long-term strategies. These preliminary strategies were based primarily on that conversation that you all had. And these would be incorporated into the draft master plan and made available for full public comment based on what we're hearing from you folks tonight. So a little bit of a reminder. Folks are often very regular users of this park. It comes with a big sense of place related to them being residents in Minnetonka. A lot of folks go there 33% more than 3 times a week. So people are really committed to this park. They find it very special. Natural resources being highly valued. The comments related to the open space being very well managed, and the restoration efforts and the natural communities there being very important to folks' experiences. So we talked through a variety of key topic areas. Tonight I'm only going to remind folks on the natural resources issues and then talk specifically about dogs in the park. So again, reminder, this restoration planning has been going on for the last few years here based on the Natural Resources Master Plan that we had completed 2 years ago now. We coordinate a variety of restoration efforts in the park. We continue to expand on that restoration. We have contractors in Purgatory now performing that restoration work that we've decided on a few years ago. And folks do go to the park for bird watching and other what we call passive recreation, so walking, not pickleball playing, for instance. And dogs in the park. So a real mixed bag in terms of people's opinions on dogs in the park. So we do see 49% of people saying the off-leash park rules are appropriate and should not be changed. But we do see a high percentage of people saying that off-leash dogs are a safety concern in the park. And I'm happy to, during the conversation, bring this data back up. Things that discourage park usage, the presence of off-leash dogs is mentioned here. Otherwise, we got good feedback over the condition of the trails and generally positive remarks about parking access, although a little light at times. So a couple additional considerations that I'd like to have you folks keep in mind. The city ordinance related to off-leash dogs applies beyond Purgatory Park's boundaries, although there are park-specific ordinance language related to our park spaces and the use of off-leash dogs in those spaces that we'll get into in a second here. We've heard from public safety that is currently difficult to enforce the ordinance the way it is written. A formal off-leash dog park, which has been acknowledged by the residents as something that some folks would have potentially been interested in, that would take an additional study beyond this park master plan to determine the right size, location, amenities that would be associated with that. So this master plan isn't going to produce, even if you folks were supporting it, a prepackaged formal dog park. It would take another step after that. Natural resources impact of the dogs are being assessed in this master plan process, so the general impacts like erosion, the widening of trails, things to that effect. And we are identifying some high conflict areas where what we're observing from the common use of off-leash dogs sort of comes in conflict with some of our high-use maintained trails. So with that, I wanted to talk briefly about some short-term options that were floated at the last meeting and we've strategized around a little bit. So one short-term solution, or strategy at least, would be to undertake a community-wide review of the current leash ordinance, consider interest in a citywide dog park strategy, including off-leash facilities in other parks. So granted, this is a Purgatory Park master plan that we're talking about. A broader conversation, would we assess for what's the general sense of the need for off-leash dog facilities in other parks beyond Purgatory? So having a broader discussion around that to that effect. Yes?
Can we tweak that to say other places? We did talk about
City property?
that it could be on city property that were outlots or.
Certainly. Yep. Absolutely. So we would further identify areas that, and the degree to which the dog activity has caused erosion and natural resources disturbance, and determine the best strategies for maintenance or repair of those areas as necessary. We could identify and better define the specific areas in the park where off-leash activity is somewhat appropriate to your judgment or generally allowable. I will showcase a map tonight for discussion that showcases sort of an area within the park where it could logically make sense to have sort of a predetermined off-leash area. And then finally, enhance the rules signage related to dogs. Perhaps update those rules, clarify those as they stand currently, and define that off-leash area a little more appropriately. So those would be the short-term ideas for discussion. And with that, it seems to make sense to review the current park ordinance a little bit. Apologies for the small text on this page. I did edit this down a little bit. But I'm going to turn it over to Darren Edlingson to talk this through briefly.
Yeah, so thank you. It's in the packet, this section of the park ordinance relating to dogs, but I'll just review a couple of the high points. And it's related to animals, not specifically dogs, but obviously the focus primarily is dogs. So animals are allowed in the parks in certain areas, subject to different restrictions. So improved trails, maintained turf areas, not including athletic fields, unimproved and unmaintained areas, and then parking lots as necessary to get to and from the parking lots to the trails or other areas in the parks. So generally that number 3, the unimproved and unmaintained areas, going back in time, that's generally any wooded natural area. So, but lately with the amount of restoration work, a little bit of that concept of unimproved isn't probably mean the same today as it did when the ordinance was written. So that's part of something with the ordinance and dogs that maybe language to look at in the future. All times within the present or in the park, the animal must be accompanied by a competent person. And then when on improved trails or maintained areas, they need to be on a leash no more than 6 feet long. That's a little harder to do with a lot of retractable leashes now that some people are good about keeping the length. Some people let them, at least they're leashed. It's a little bit of a benefit, but they get a longer than 6 feet. Unless otherwise signed, dogs can be off-leash within areas of the park that are unimproved and unmaintained, provided they're under voice command. So this was talked about last time. Currently, there's not any area in any park that is signed to prevent dogs from being off-leash, but that could be something that could be looked at, done in parks without having to change the ordinance. When people have them on the leash, they have to be within the sight of the owner, and they're only supposed to have 2 dogs at a maximum with them. And then lastly, of the high points is that the dogs are not allowed to harass or disturb other park users or other animals or dogs in the park. So several other items in there that maybe a little not as important to the discussion that you can read on your own. But that's kind of a summary of generally what the park ordinance is trying to highlight for the regarding dogs.
Thank you, Darren.
So moving a little further into the future, some optional mid and long-term strategies that were discussed last week or last month. Track and identify those particular conflict points. These are areas where we hear general complaints to public safety about dogs interacting with folks on the maintained trail, for instance, and develop specific mitigation strategies related to those particular conflict areas. So fencing or landscaping or distinct separation between off-leash areas and those formal maintained trails. Formalize the connection between the parking area where foot traffic and erosion has grown quite severe in some of those areas. Consider paving some of those locations, and even adding dog amenities where appropriate. And then finally, long-term options. Develop this idea of formal off-leash areas, citywide, city properties, with resident input at Purgatory and sort of this overall citywide park strategy. So this would be a resident-driven process like a lot of our other park projects, where we'd solicit feedback and work with folks to understand what they're looking for in a formal off-leash dog park area. So I put together this map with the consultants. A little hard to see, but that pinkish blob in the middle is where the significant amount of off-leash area occurs in the park. Granted, folks walk on all the informal trails. You witness off-leash dogs sort of everywhere, but this being the sort of key spot that could be potentially identified as a off-leash dog area without a fence. Trying to define a limit to this in some capacity via mapping by the parking facilities stating that this is the off-leash area, some signage off the trail that would indicate where it's appropriate to take your dog off their leash, and sort of setting the stage a little more in terms of the rules of how far your dog is allowed to get from you and near the trails and some of those concerns. Granted, this does concentrate dog activity in this particular area, potentially. It doesn't necessarily address the difficulty to enforce from some degree, but this does sort of serve as a point for conversation and getting something. If we were to tighten the rules as they stand now without fencing something in, could we put an area down on a map and try to enforce that with some signage? So, big conversation. Do you have any changes to these proposed short, long, and midterm recommendations regarding dogs? And please keep in mind that we are trying to get towards a draft master plan, and we're hoping for comments from you folks that can help facilitate that process. And we're producing a draft master plan that you generally support and putting that out to the residents for full feedback. Thank you.
Start off by saying thank you for doing this. I know this kind of came up, I don't want to say last minute, but you guys did a lot of work in the last month. One of the things that I want to do is open up the floor to public comment before we start our discussion, because there may be points of view or what have you that we want to consider. So if there's anybody out here who'd like to talk, the microphone's up there, just one at a time. Go up, say your name, your address, and yeah, just whatever you'd like to share.
My name is Eric Murray. I'm at 5554 Nantucket Place in Minnetonka. So real quick background is we do live off, our property backs up to Purgatory Park, and I walk our dog on a leash almost every day out there, and I have to interact with off-leash dogs on many occasions. But first and foremost, I believe the park leash regulations need to be changed, mostly from that February 2023 Park Board meeting where Deanne Bloom explained how difficult it is to enforce these things. And so the lack of enforcement, I think, also leads to people feeling like they don't really necessarily need to follow the rules. Many of them do, but like I said, there's plenty of times where I have to deal with off-leash dogs. And I've reviewed the ordinances of many of the cities around here. I know Member Ingram there also quick overviewed them. And from what I could find, the ones I looked at in general, they all do say they're required to be on a leash except in a designated off-leash area by the city. And the issue I have real quick with this one is when there's not a border, I feel like it's going to lead to the same issues that currently are there. You can have the signs that say where the borders are, but if there's nothing physical that if that judge were to look at and somebody says, I don't know where the border is, I don't think it's going to be enforceable again. So I kind of feel like the most important thing to do when trying to design any of this stuff is to make sure that there's a regulation that is able to be enforced by our community service officers. Thanks.
Thank you.
My name is Pamela Layton.
You have to put the
Oh, yeah,
mic on.
the mic. This will be one to be able to hear you.
My name is Pamela Layton. I live at 5538 Nantucket Place. My property abuts the park. I've lived there for 34 years. I've seen a lot of changes in the park, and the most dramatic changes I've seen, one is the excellent restoration work that is going on, which I am very pleased about, but also is the increase of incidents with dogs. When we moved there, one of the things that I loved about it was all of the wildlife we saw in that park. Fox, otters, pheasants, all gone. And that is not from people use, that is from dogs ranging throughout the park. And the other thing about dogs, for where I live, is that whole thing about voice control. I have dogs in my backyard, which is not fenced, multiple times during the week. And they are coming after the rabbits. I consider my backyard sort of be a habitat. And they are never under voice control. And I have been known to take dogs by the collar back to the path and call for the owners. And someone might show up, or they might just keep calling, But I agree with Eric. Whatever we do has to be enforceable. And I agree about a fence. Dogs are communal animals. If they're wandering in that section that's designated, and there's a dog being walked on the path, and there's nothing to stop them, they are going to join their friends and see who's out there. So I really want this to have some teeth in it, and I love that park. But I think we have a long way to bringing it back to the point where it fulfills the needs. I am also a bird watcher. I like to be off the trail a little bit, and I've encountered plenty of dogs. And, it's not the dogs for me, it's the dog owners who, if you say your dog is supposed to be on a leash on the path, I don't know if any of you have encountered it, but there are some really nasty responses to, do you know that your dog should be on a leash? The nicest one is, yes, I know, and then they blow you off. But there are much more negative responses. And it's like somebody said, I feel like the dogs have more rights in the park than I do. And I agree with that. So I really hope that we can use purgatory as an example of how we can manage this problem going forward. Thanks.
Thank you.
Hello, I'm Angela Marrera, and I also live at 5554 Nantucket Place with my husband. Well, I do like that we're considering an area that will hopefully be an area that can be defined for the off-leash dog use. Because as it stands now, it really does create the entire park as sort of a dog off-leash area. So I think that's really helpful. I don't think, I agree with everybody who says that it looks like if we don't define the border with a fence or something physical, that the dogs will somehow magically stay in that area. Since I live in that neighborhood that has frequent dogs ranging into our neighborhood, it probably won't work very well just to have another sign. Nobody seems to pay attention to the current sign, and the majority of the off-leash dog walkers are regulars, so they should know the rules. So my suggestions, I wrote this up. Here, I'll just go through my bullets again for you if you didn't have a chance to read my email that I sent or it didn't get incorporated in the addendum. I do think that we need to institute a leash regulation. I know you can't change the ordinance, but if you change the leash regulation at Purgatory Park to flip the language so that it says that all dogs must be on leash except for a certain area, that would be really helpful, just to be clear and concise and help everybody understand that if I tell someone, oh, you need to have your dog on leash in this area, there's no question. They can't be like, oh, well, I see my dog, so it's under voice command. No, that's not what voice command is, so we don't get into that back and forth. I also think a fence is very critical. It needs to define that off-leash area very clearly. I think it also will prevent that charging out, those dogs charging out onto the maintain trail. And then one of the most important things I think with this plan is I don't want this to turn into a permanent solution. So it has to be temporary. I don't want paving or infrastructure except for that temporary fence, because I think if you start just adding on to this, it'll start turning into a permanent solution. So I think a temporary 1 to 2 years as the maximum would be great. I think that would give you enough time to analyze a new suitable location. And then I'm not sure what your powers are, but if you can edit the current ordinance and send it to the city council so that they have to look at the language and say, hey, yeah, we have to look at this because the park board is suggesting a new ordinance. I don't know if that's possible, but I'd say make a motion and see what happens. Thank you.
Thank you.
I can't hear.
Anybody? Kelly, did you add my email to the addendum?
Yes.
Yeah, we have it right here.
All right, great. That's easier. Do you want me to pull it out? Is that easier? No, as long as you have it. I sent an email kind of under the wire this afternoon, so
It starts on page 7 of the addendum.
thanks. I'm Heather Holm. I live at 15327 Lakeshore Avenue. And I just want to say that, and I said this in my email that I sent late in the day, I do support this idea of a temporary plan to define a specific area where off-leash dogs can be within the park. I think that is a great idea. So I just want to thank staff for their work putting this together. My email kind of outlines some of the things that illustrate why this plan really does need to be a short-term plan. And the first one is the plan does not adhere to the Natural Resources Master Plan. And part of your mission as a park board is to adhere to the goals and strategies of the NRMP. And the first way that it doesn't do that is the area proposed for the temporary solution is in an area that the NRMP identified as both high quality and high priority for restoration. So this is a restored tallgrass prairie that was installed in the 90s by former staff members. And we as residents have quite literally just watched it decline and degrade over time with its overuse and not sort of managed use of the space. The second sort of point that I made, and again, I do support this temporary plan if it's temporary, but I just want to echo what others have said, that I really like the idea of the buffers for both the wetland as well as part of the prairie. I do agree that we need some sort of physical boundary, especially on the east side for this temporary solution. I included some drone images that I took last October in the park. I am a restoration volunteer. We've been taking some drone imagery of some of the areas that we work in to show positive change over the time. And so I included some imagery from the proposed area with a fence representing that buffer that has been proposed. And that fence would literally stop a lot of the dogs that are running into adjoining neighborhoods. It would also create that physical line or barrier for community service officers to enforce the ordinance. It would limit the conflicts that have been occurring of dogs running into the maintained trail and disturbing other park users. And most importantly, I'm putting on my restoration hat, it would allow this high-quality prairie to rest and recover from so much use and abuse. And having part of it fenced off from this proposed short-term off-leash area would really allow that to happen. And that would make a lot of us happy. I'm not speaking on behalf of anyone else, of course, but a lot of the people who really value the high-quality natural resources and experience and fulfillment that we get from volunteering in the park. Lastly, as Mr. Ellingson talked about, we've really sort of changed how we think about unimproved and unmaintained areas than what we were 30 years ago. And as this has been identified in the Natural Resources Master Plan, this area where the off-leash area is proposed is in fact a maintained area. And I included the map that shows you all of the areas that are currently being actively restored by staff, volunteers, and contractors. That being said, I think some of us are willing to put up with further degradation of that prairie. But I just want to say all of those things to give you urgency on this timeline, and that we need to find a long-term solution that for off-leash dogs that is not in that middle section area of the prairie. So thank you very much for listening to me ramble on, and I'll pass the mic to someone else.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Gerald Gershon. I live at 13111 April Lane in Minnetonka. I'm actually on the opposite side, closer to Meadow Park, which is my preferred park. My dog is close to 16, so he doesn't quite walk as far anymore. But it's a very different culture at that park, and I know that the layout is different, but there are signs on both the Plymouth Road end and by the Oakland Road end that say dogs must be on leash. So I guess I don't quite understand why it's different in parks. But I walk a lot of the parks, and it seems like this issue is more particular to Purgatory Park and the culture that's developed there. And I understand that people with dogs feel very passionately about that. But I went on the website again, and I see the designation is Purgatory Community Preserve. And as one of the other people mentioned, who's been here a long time, used to see a lot of animals there that you don't see anymore. So to me, that's not really keeping up with the mission of a preserve. So I think the idea of a dog park actually came from more of the restoration community about how can we make both of these things work, and it would be a compromise. And so I do support how staff are moving in this area to get more definition and to hopefully get a dog park so it's clear that this area is where to run around. But I understand it has to be a phased approach. So I support what Heather Holm just talked about and what the staff are doing. Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Carl Nelson. We live at 5541 Nantucket Place, which is right next to the park. And I'd like to just sort of endorse everything that Heather said. I read her letter. It makes a lot of sense. The well-defined boundary is something that makes a great deal of sense, because otherwise it's just too fluid. I mean, this 50-foot buffer zone and that kind of thing is it just doesn't make sense. Who's going to get out there with a tape measure? And so a fence is something you can point to, and perhaps finally will cause some type of enforcement to be put in place, because every time I go out there and see that sign that says, "Due to the recent increase in animal-related incidents, leash ordinances will be strictly enforced." So it's been up there for, 10, 15 years. And it's kind of a joke, So let's get serious and put something in place that really defines where the dogs can be. And again, as Heather said, it's a temporary solution because of the conflict between the restored areas, or the natural resources stewardship goals that the city itself has articulated in their plan, and the intensive effects of an abundance of canines in the park. There's a basic conflict there that has to be resolved. So I have confidence that the city will find a good solution. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Sam Rush. I live at 12625 Sherwood Place, but I grew up, and my parents live at 5717 Scenic Heights Drive, which is across the street from Scenic Heights Elementary, which is, is on the front end of the park. So I've used that park, Purgatory, quite a bit with my dogs that I've had over the past, and as myself running and walking and just using the park in general. I'm going to echo and support all the people that they've said about the fence and everything like that. But one of the things I wanted just to give you an example of a situation that I had with my dog. We were running, my dog and I, on the trail, on the gravel limestone trail, and we had a dog come up to us that was on a retractable leash that had gotten away from its owner. The dog came up, sniffed my dog. Okay, fine. The kid, like 10, 12 years old, came up, got the dog. We finally separated. My dog and I started running again as we rounded the corner going up the hill towards the Nantucket area. And the dog came back and chased after us and bit my dog on the leg and would not let my dog go. It was on a retractable leash. It was like a 16-foot leash. I think retractable leashes aren't okay. Once you get past that 6 foot, you've lost control of your dog. So, one of the things is enforcing that 6 foot. I called the police. They came over to my house, talked to me about it. They went over back to the park. The kids were gone, and it was an hour later. I knew that was going to happen, but I wanted just to get people to know that there's a dog. It was on a leash. It still bit my dog. And I just wanted just to share that story because that is a situation that's happened. That my dog's also been harassed by other dogs. Voice command. Even if you have a collar, an e-collar, they're not responding back on the first one almost always, it seems like. And I do take my dog over to some of the Three Rivers dog parks, and we see some of the same stuff there. But I want to just kind of make a suggestion that if we do the dog park, whether it is at Purgatory or not, I like the idea of having a park pass and using that money then to provide a community service officer for that area so that we can actually enforce the rules. So I just wanted to share with you all that. I've had other situations where I've been confronted with dogs, but I don't want to, share and bore you all with those stories. But I just wanted to share that information with you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Cindy Iden, 16824 Excelsior Boulevard, Minnetonka. I am I've looked at the map, and I think we are definitely taking some steps forward in terms of, just confining where the dogs are going to be and defining that. I think that's really important. Personally, I'd like it to be a little bit smaller space. So, and I say that for the good of wildlife. I think the area down towards the bridge is an area that wildlife likes to make use of as well, and as well as birders. And so that's just small. That's just something that I would like. That's whether that happens or not, I'm not really. I'm happy that this is in the plans. I think the fence would really be helpful for a number of reasons, and even if it's just along the east side. All of those have been stated, but the other part is we do get back in there as people that want to work and help start cleaning up the park more, and we can rest assured, I think I said that the last time, if we know that the dogs are not going to be tramping through there, we can go ahead and get started with further restoration efforts in there. This last year, there were 430 hours worth of volunteer hours put in, around 50 some events, or 43 events. At any rate, there's a lot of public interest in taking care of that park, and a lot of hours being put in, and I would like that to be a consideration if we're thinking about putting in some sort of delineation, some sort of fence along that area. We could actually start seeing some improvement in that area. Thank you. Thank you for everybody's efforts.
Thank you. Okay, so if there's not any more public comment, we can go ahead and start the discussion on our end.
I have a couple comments. I like the idea of a temporary. I understand we can't snap our fingers and solve all of this all at once. So I support the idea, as have the people who've spoken, to have a temporary solution. I also support the idea of making the temporary solution pretty short, and unless there's some overwhelming reason not to, I would go ahead and I would direct the city staff to start working on the northwest corner now, so that it's ready in 2 years. I like the idea of a fence, at least on the east and maybe south side. If I was going to go to the park and volunteer and be crawling around on my hands and knees, as I usually do when I'm restoring stuff, I would want a fence between me and the dogs. I was reading I think it was Three Rivers Park District comments about how to use their dog parks, and one of the things that I thought was interesting that I hadn't thought about before was that when you go into the dog park, you should not have your dog on a leash, because it puts them at a disadvantage versus the dogs that are loose. They can't run away if they feel threatened. And that if there's the current situation and the proposed temporary solution without a fence would perpetuate that, where you've got people on the path, like you did with the dog that got bitten, and a dog that's not under control. So the fence would help eliminate that. And I find it very interesting that the Purgatory Meadow Park gets to have leashes that say, signs that say the dogs have to be on a leash. I want some of those.
It's the same sign. I think it's the same sign. I think it's the same sign. The difference is there's still unmaintained areas in Meadow Park.
There are, well,
Well, if you want to go off into the weeds, but the wetlands, but most of the trail is. You know,
okay. It is different.
I think it's the same sign. Maybe it's not.
I'm not sure. I don't recall a sign that says must be on leash, but it could certainly be there.
But the culture is very different, as Jerry said.
Yeah. Gerald, you can send us a picture.
Yeah, I'll send you photos.
Okay.
I'll see if I can find them. If not, I'll take new ones.
Okay, so that's all. Thank you, Chair.
I would like to just echo what some people said about clarity. I think that's going to be really important. Even looking at this, it's a little bit like wordy and like being very clear. Dogs must be on leash except for, because I think if it gets wordy and small print and big, no one's even looking at it. It's background noise, and so maybe just like succinct, clear signage as a way to make sure it's actually enforceable, and you as citizens can point to it and be like, look, this is what it says clearly, and feel empowered as people living right next to it to point to the things that, at least for now, what we can do as a park board, what are the things that are realistic that are within this, and then hopefully move it up still, but at least on a temporary level, create some action.
Matt, can I ask, why did we not discuss having a temporary fence put in? Why is that not in the?
Can you repeat the question? I couldn't hear.
I said, why is there not any mention of a fence in the new draft?
I would say that what was presented was sort of the least expensive option that could easily be implemented in very short term. To do a fence, absolutely feasible from a construction standpoint, but there's costing and bidding and construction time periods involved in that. Again, the figure shown was just to spark conversation. But the reason I didn't include it was just how long it would take to implement that.
And one of the things you had mentioned earlier is that any official dog park designation would be a bigger project than this plan. Would that would any potential fencing be a bigger project than this plan as well?
Yes.
Okay.
Well, we would need to figure out how to pay for that in the short term.
Okay.
If I might suggest that a fence that is a dog park type amenity would perhaps come out of a different pot of money than the restoration money.
Most likely, yeah.
Which is smaller.
Can you go back to the short term? Just so we can see it.
Sure.
One of my questions from after hearing all of the public comment, talking about having some sort of temporary border put up. So you put a temporary border up for 1 to 2 years, but then you have to take it down, right? So then what's to say that the dogs just don't come back? Like, how is putting up a temporary, I'm in favor of a fence of some sort. I don't understand, though, the temporariness of it. Once you take it down, there's nothing to stop people from coming back. So even if we create a dog park somewhere else, that doesn't stop people from coming back to Purgatory once there's no fence and going through. So I guess my question is, how can you truly have a temporary solution in a park of this nature where eventually it just all disappears?
Oh, so you're saying that if we've magically built a dog park somewhere, but that people won't use it, they'll go back to.
Why wouldn't they? Why couldn't they? There's nothing to stop them from doing it if you take the fence down. An ordinance that has to be
unless
enforced.
we change the
right?
laws and
Yeah.
have
Yeah.
somebody out there looking officious.
Right. Right. But that, of course, then also goes into how do you fund that?
Yes.
Where are we getting the money for it? Who's enforcing it? How are we creating these ordinances? How long does that all take? So I think while I agree with having a short-term solution, I feel like it needs to be really well defined, and then you have to be thinking of what happens next.
Yes.
First of all, I think this is really good, and I agree with this approach. I also agree with all the comments that were submitted, and in particular, I think Heather's addendum had a lot of good definition. I've been an active user of Purgatory for, I don't know, over 25 years. And about 20 years ago, I actually spoke at the City Council in support of maintaining the current off-leash dogs, because I was an active off-leash dog person. But 20 years ago, that path down the center pink area was probably 3.5 or 4 feet wide, and the prairie was there, and there was probably a handful of dog users continually, but not a massive number. And the change in the amount of use and the mentality of owners, not most owners, but a few owners, has made it to the point where I think we really do have to take action. And I think the community feedback from the post plan and even the 47% in this study that show that they're not uncomfortable because of off-leash dogs, and that includes dog owners. I'm one of those who has a dog. We use the maintained path, and we've experienced similar to the gentleman behind me, and particularly, I'm sorry, the lady who talked about the passionate, disfavorable owners commentary. But I think one of the things, can we put up your map, your 3-point map thing? Yeah. The last discussion right here was really interesting because one of our comments that came in the addendum was from a dog owner that's supportive of a fenced area, but she's still going to want to walk her dog off leash in the center. And I think that's what we're going to experience. And so it just hit me when Corey was talking about the fence and we put it up. To my thinking, the fence is a good idea, especially on the eastern perimeter. It's particularly valuable in that bottom third because the trail is really close together, and the Nantucket Place issue is the top third. So clearly, there's an issue probably along the whole thing. And unless you absolutely do change the regulation where you cannot have a dog off leash and can enforce it, you're going to always need that fence.
Yeah.
Because you're going to have to protect people on the primary path. An alternative is to fence the entire area and have it off leash because you're trying to preserve the prairie. So I think that's a real something to keep in mind is that if you had an eastern perimeter, which I think is a really good idea, is it truly temporary or is it something that you're going to need in any event? I also think there's an advantage. It starts to say we're getting serious. If I'm off leash in the center and I'm used to my dog running all over the place and coming up on the bottom third, the city is taking notice and is trying to take some steps to mitigate the issues. Interestingly, if you can pull up at all, or maybe it's not on that page, your big map where you had your things in the corner, upper corner, you show the bottom third that's kind of off there. It's interesting because there's a lot of the park, the green at the bottom and below the green at the bottom where there's more green. That's a real good off-leash area, and it's a large area, and it's all trails, so you don't have the same kind of issues. And there isn't a lot of problems there, because if you're off trail there, you kind of know you're going to expect to see dogs. And I like I don't know if you're looking for comments on it or not, but I like the informal trail closures you're proposing there. I think you've closed the right ones, maintaining the right ones, and with maybe one exception on a little piece where you come up from the Stadola cul-de-sac where you've got one straight shot of about 10 feet that's full of erosion, there's actually a bypass. I I would probably try to close off that straight shot. But overall, I like where you're trying to approach this, but I do support the commentary about the need for a barrier. And I think the city should think hard about the fact that this probably is a permanent barrier. And again, I echo the points about the language of our park regulation as well as the city animal control, which was added to the addendum. Because that one, again, has the wording is such that's pretty convoluted, but I think Ann or someone asked last time, well, you mean you can walk through the city with your dog off leash, let them run around? And you can, according to the ordinance. Technically, they're not running around, they're by your side under voice control, but your dog does not have to be leashed to walk in the city. And that's pretty unusual in the western suburbs. So,
Dave, can you clarify? I'm looking at the picture of the bottom third of the park by scrolling up on that
Yeah.
page well, it's a picture of the master plan. I got the part about you approve of
the informal trails, or?
that you approve of closing the informal trails, and then I thought I heard you say something about that the bottom third of the park
Oh, I was just saying, maybe.
is a dog park too. and
Well,
I-
it's not a dog park. My point is, right now, there's a lot of off-leash dogs there, and there doesn't seem to be the same level of there's not the conflict that you experience. The pink area is a problem because, one, it's under restoration,
Yep.
and it is a prime area, and it receives the heaviest use, and you have the most, I'll say, aggressive dog play. You know, you have packs of dogs running, chasing balls, chasing each other, having a great time. Whereas when you get down into the woods, you have people walking with their dogs off leash on a trail.
So it's more quiet and sort of.
Well, it's just two things. I think one is, you don't have the pack mentality running wild, and if you as an individual are walking in there, I think you're kind of expecting you might run into a dog off leash. But if you're on that main trail, either the asphalt trail or the limestone trail, I'm protected by a sign from the city that says I shouldn't expect to have a dog come up and attack me, or even just try to be friendly to my dog. If my dog's leash aggressive, I'm more worried about that dog coming up and being damaged by my dog. And mine's on a leash, like it's supposed to be, but the other dog isn't. And their owner's yelling to me, "Don't worry, my dog's friendly."
Yeah.
And I'm going, my dog might not be.
So are you? I hear what you're saying. Are you then suggesting that the lower third could also be opened?
It is open now.
Could continue. Well, in this temporary concept where there's going to be a specified area that's the only off-leash dog area.
I don't think that's what you're intending, is it?
No.
Yeah,
Really?
yeah. They're not.
That the remainder of the park would be open to off-leash dogs? No.
Okay.
No, if I have a dog down here in the green, off of the maintained trail, I can have it off leash there.
No.
You're saying
According
that,
to
no?
our current ordinance.
Yeah, but so you're saying under this thing, the only area that'd be off leash is the pink. Okay.
Yes.
That I didn't understand. Okay. That's a bigger change.
It is.
But I also hear you questioning whether or not that's the best area for it.
Well, I mean, the reason why that's pink and barriered is because, like I said, it's kind of where you get the most activity, the highest concentration of dogs. You're going to have to put up a lot of signs down in the green area then.
There's definitely going to be some work to do to change the culture. That's.
Well, it's just, I mean, that would require us, I mean, the one thing that Darren's reading of the thing hit me that I hadn't read quite that way before is it's very clear that if it's a non-maintained area, you can have your dog off leash, unless it's signed. So you're going to have to sign, because that's what our current regulation from the city and the park regulation is that unless it's signed, if it's not maintained, I can have my dog off leash. So if you're going to have that whole green area at the bottom, or the whole rest of the park that's not pink, no dogs off leash, you're going to have to sign every intersection of an informal trail to the main trail. And you better be able to enforce that, because you're not going to be able to. I was just bringing up, there doesn't ever seem to be much conflict once you're, over the ridge.
I don't agree.
Oh, you don't? Okay.
I do not agree.
Okay.
There.
We got to say your
Okay,
name.
Pamela Layton. I have been on maintained trails, and I'm not sure if anyone can follow this, but from where I live on Nantucket, I go across the bridge, I go up the hill, I go down.
Yep.
And there is a major trail, I don't think it's maintained, where lots of people bring their dogs in, and they're bringing them in to have them in the open area. They are never on leashes. And I have been accosted by dogs there. I've had dogs jump
But you're on the
up
main
me.
trail?
I'm on the main trail.
Okay.
They don't put their dogs on the leash to cross that. It's a short hop. I'm just going over there. I'm sorry, they cannot be off leash in that area. There are lots of problems out there.
Okay.
So,
Thank you.
thanks.
I'll just go back to then, I didn't understand it that way. In order to, you have to change the regulation, or you have to sign every single one of those informal crossings.
I think
Or both.
to this effect, some of the signage could be a map showcasing the area, and there'd be signage at the particular intersections when you're entering that area, but it clearly stated that everywhere outside of that area is not for off-leash dogs.
And one of the things I'm thinking about too is,
So I'm sorry, just,
no, go ahead.
so your better sign would be at the parking lots and the
Yes.
cul-de-sac is dogs could only be off-leashed in the center area where hopefully we have a fence. It'd be better to say they can only be off-leashed there.
I think even what we were saying earlier, all dogs must be leashed except.
Yeah.
Not saying, not. It's
Yeah.
the expectation is they are leashed except for. I think that just sets up a totally different dynamic
Well,
that
and-
was brought up earlier.
And eliminating the unmaintained, maintained concept,
Yeah.
because
It's
your
super
average
unclear.
person is like,
I don't know what that means.
yeah, there's not signs like saying maintained and unmaintained. And kind of with that, just kind of going back to the ordinance real quick and talking about the culture. If there was this change, I know changing a culture is bigger than adding a couple signs. Like, would that be something that would be like in the Minnetonka memo and like other avenues, so it wouldn't just be hoping people read a sign that they probably walked by 4,000 times and not read before?
I was going to jump on that too. Like, education around this, I think could also be really important. Like, people should know, like, look at all this restoration work that's happening, and like this is how dogs impact it, or this, because I like to believe in the goodness of people and that there might actually be like more understanding. Like, I own dogs, and even listening and hearing this, it's like, I trust my dogs, but you should just leash them. There's a lot of, they might be buckthorn around and stuff. So I feel like in the memo, if there could even be just a little education on like why it can make a difference or how it makes a difference. I don't think it's going to radically change things, but at least it might, those middle people, or help people understand why the change is coming apart, so they don't just feel like this is all being taken from me. But it's like, our goal is to help preserve. These are the things that we're trying to do. Can you help us in this effort? In like a simultaneous education around it, I think could be helpful.
This would be huge. If you think if we can pull that off, that would be huge. But it really does require, I think, a change in our park regulations, because the way it's worded now, you can go through Lone Lake, and at least that trail's virtually all paved, and you do run into people with their dogs off leash, but not as common. It's kind of like Gerald's comment about Meadow, but that 67% that use this park every week, they're on their fourth generation of dogs. They're on their third, fourth, fifth generation of dogs that they have had off leash here. And so it's going to be, that would be a huge change to not be able to use that other area.
And by Jane Ball's note that she sent, it's fine to have an off-leash dog park as long as it doesn't change the current policy that the entirety of Purgatory
Yeah.
Park, other than the major maintained paths, is an off-leash dog park. So I'm sure she's not the only one who thinks this. And this person is going to be harder to convince that what we're doing is even acceptable. And I don't know what to do, but I don't see any, I can't yet see any middle ground that would.
But if we had a
Make
sign
her
that said
happier.
that Ella's signage was the best, I can't remember how she worded, where you can only be off leash there, then we have to have changed the regulations too.
Yes.
Because otherwise someone's going to go, I don't care what your sign says, I know what the regulation says.
I mean, there's a process. I mean, we've changed regulations before, or I'm sorry, ordinances.
Right,
Yeah.
correct. So park regulation, so as one of the short-term recommendations was to take the park regulation, the first one, right, was look at the city ordinance. So if that gets into the plan, the city council approves the plan, then that comes back to you, and then we look at the ordinance, and that includes 6-foot leash, that includes dogs in areas, that includes other animals, that includes, it's a big document, it's not just dogs.
Yeah.
But yes,
Yeah. Mhm.
we reviewed that. Darren, when did we review it's been
2018, if I
Right.
remember right.
I mean, we talked about sledding and, the whole bunch of different topics. Correct.
Okay.
So that, to get it in the plan where the council approves this plan, then it gets that ball rolling.
Yep.
And which is what is recommended and people seem to be asking for.
Yep. And with those ordinances, in theory, would come more concrete and enforceable consequences, I guess, for not following the rules.
I think clarity is a big piece of it.
Yes.
Yeah. I would also suggest that I'm not sure who gets to approve this, but to designate all the hockey rinks as small neighborhood dog parks during the off-season, which is getting longer and longer. I think when we did the tour of Meadow Park, we saw that it looked like people were using it that way because the opening was fenced off with something blockaded. And that would be inexpensive, I would think. Way less work than making a fence.
I'll ask Matt that. I don't know if that's a short-term possibility that might help relieve some pressure. I don't know if that would.
Yes, that's what I referred to as the citywide dog park strategy. That would be a potential option converting.
But we wouldn't have to wait.
No.
Do the really easy stuff right now.
But it sounds like there would be a process to designate a dog park in the area. Which, and I just wanted to say, like, we've talked a lot about the short-term recommendations and the midterm, but, like, I do think it's important that the city pursue, like, looking into a bigger dog park plan.
Yep.
Because there seems to be interest in it, a lot of interest in it. And I know there's a process, so just getting that started as soon as possible.
Is it possible to start work on the northwest corner even though we haven't gone through all that?
It's certainly the draft master plan could have a concept related to that, and that would then be approved, but there would be another project after that to cost it and do more due diligence there to figure out exactly how it would work.
That'd be a huge project.
It'd be a big
because
project.
it's a lot of clearing.
There'd be a lot of clearing, very significant fencing related to this idea of dogs being off-leash together. Often you see sort of a entryway that's fenced in with 2 gates, and
Yep.
then other dog park, official dog park amenities. That would be a secondary project.
So just to weigh in briefly too, I think initially the comment I heard was about could we start just prepping the area? We don't have funds to do that right now, so that would have to be an outcome identified in this plan to identify, that would get the ball rolling to identify funds to do that work. So that's not something that's identified for natural resources, for our stewardship funds to do that work right now.
Would it have to be stewardship money? This is a recreational amenity like the inflatable things at the beach, in my mind.
And so,
Or resurfacing a tennis court. You know,
right,
it's-
and anytime that level of project happens, we need to budget for it. And so what I'm saying right now is we don't have the funds identified.
Okay.
So if it's identified in this plan as a strategy that's recommended and the council approves it, then that gets the ball rolling to include it in future budgets to start doing that work.
So that would be on an aggressive timetable. You might be able to break ground 3 years from now if it's approved.
And that's
Yeah,
also
yes.
saying if Purgatory Park,
Yeah,
and the broader
whatever,
thing
yeah.
was the one, because we would hate to start it and be like, oh, no, never mind, and find a different place.
Well, there's a bunch of buckthorn up there that nobody would mind too much if it was gone.
You got a couple.
Once the master plan got adopted and all the future amenities were identified, then there'd be implementation of that through the capital improvements plan.
Okay.
So then, say if there was a dog park in the future, in the, whatever the final master plan is, then there'd be a CIP page for each of maybe the different items that are done with respect to everything in the park to implement the master plan, and one of those items would potentially be a dog park. So then there'd be a CIP page to identify a budget, for design, for removals and to build it and the fencing and all that. So that would be as part of a CIP.
If the city was given some money, would that, and it was in the plan, so that could it be funded outside of whatever city money there is? Can we have a bake sale?
I don't know.
The city has a Parks for Tomorrow program where people can donate to the city, and we've constructed improvements through that. So like the picnic shelter at the Glen Lake baseball fields. So the Glen Lake Mighty Mites had a parent in the group that lost their life to cancer, I believe. So they did a big fundraiser to try to build that. So they donated a significant amount of money to build that shelter. So that wasn't in the CIP initially, but they had a significant donation to that, and we were able to move that forward way faster. So there are opportunities if there is it'd have to be a sizable donation, but there are avenues to, people can donate things for projects. Typically it's $1,000 for a park bench, but it could be anything.
Okay. Not that I'm going to write a check right now. Just curious.
There'd be a lot of zeros on it.
It would. Well, I don't know. It depends. You could get it started with not too many zeros, I think. Forestry mowing and some herbicide. Sorry, I'll stop
It would
now.
first, like a dog park would first need to be identified as part of the master plan.
Yep.
If it's in the master plan and somebody made a big donation and then accelerated that, that would be a way to do it. If there wasn't in the master plan and somebody wanted to donate something for something that's not in the master plan, that's a whole other
Harder.
tangent.
Okay. Thank you for clarifying.
If I just have one last comment. I think I want to compliment the people commenting tonight, because they're all more or less for constraining the dogs, but also being accepting of this proposal. And I think particularly given that Heather brought up an interesting point in her addendum, it is, it may not be what we think of as a maintained area, but based on the resource plan, it is. And I think, given the work going on, right now, the ridge line, are we maintaining that, Matt? Okay?
Yes.
So right now, basically, did we burn over there on the west side of the creek?
Yes.
We could take a position right now that the entire park is being maintained. So what does that mean? Can't have dogs off leash anywhere. Makes enforcement really easy. I'm not proposing that, but I think, I didn't realize the designation of the resource plan calls it maintained. And it is a high value area, so I thought that was interesting.
So do you want a motion of some kind? What's happening
It was
here?
just feedback, if
Just
I'm
feedback
correct.
tonight? Yeah, so
Okay.
if
So I
that
got
has
a lot.
feedback enough.
No, I feel like I've collected a good amount of feedback, particular comments that would lead towards pages in the draft master plan that you folks would support and could go out for full-scale resident comment.
Okay.
Thank you for putting this together, Matt.
Yep.
It was awesome that you guys did this, and
Thank you.
the time that you had. So, okay, we can move on to the next item: adoption of the strategic plan.
Thank you, Chair. So back in December, we looked at a draft strategic plan for 2024. We actually switched the layout a little bit. If you remember, last year we had the vision, mission, and goals and strategies. This year, we tweaked a few of those, but then pulled out a number of action items that we put on the bottom. So based on your feedback from the last meeting, we edited that draft and have come back to you with a document that we think either you may have more recommendations, or in the end, we're hoping we get some type of approval of the 2024 strategic plan. So I'd be open to any questions or comments.
Thank you for putting in 11 and 12, the dog issues.
And I read through it, and I mean, you guys did awesome. So I think it looks good.
Otherwise, we would be looking for a motion at some point tonight.
Does anyone else have any thoughts?
I thought it was fine.
Okay, sweet. So we'll take a motion to approve the strategic plan.
I'll make a motion to approve the strategic plan as written.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Cool. Want to take a roll?
Yep. Byersdorf.
Approve.
DiLorenzo.
Approve.
Hanley.
Approve.
Ingraham.
Approve.
And Wallach.
Approve.
And then the last business item is the appointment of the chair and vice chair. So every year, we have to appoint a chair for the park board and a vice chair. It's a one-year term starting February 1st, ends the next year's January 31st. So currently we've got Chris Wallach as our chair, and then Ben Jacobs, who is not here, as our vice chair, which their terms end at the end of January. So we are looking for appointment starting in February 1st of 2024. I did get an email from Ben Jacobs, and he said he is more than willing to continue as the vice chair if the board deems he is fit. So it's really up to you all to discuss. People can remain in the same position year after year if they want, or we can change it up, whatever you all prefer.
Does anyone want to be chair?
Chris, do you want to be chair again?
I mean, I'll be chair, but if somebody else wants to be chair, that's fine too.
I think you've done an awesome job.
You got it. You're rocking it.
All right. So, okay. So I'll.
The pay's pretty good too.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. So I'll throw my name in for chair and then nominate. Do we nominate?
Yeah, Ben said he would. So
Yeah,
we can do it
Ben
all in
is.
one motion if somebody wanted to motion, if you're comfortable with
Yeah.
that. And Ben has said he was comfortable with vice chair. That's
So you need a motion to nominate Chris
for
and Ben?
both. You could do it all in one.
Chris and Ben. Nominated.
Perfect. Want to take roll?
Did we get a second?
Second.
Oh.
Okay, sounds good. Yes, Byersdorf.
Approve.
DiLorenzo.
Approve.
Hanley.
Approve.
Ingraham.
Approve.
And Wallach.
Approve. All right. Moving on to the information items.
Park board member report, sorry.
Oh, sorry.
Yep. If anybody had any reports.
I could just say that we had our December 9th Winter Farmers Market, and it went really well. We had a really good turnout, lots of great vendors, and everybody seemed really happy with it. So, and that was here at the community center, and a few of the board members were there, so, and some of the staff. So I appreciate everybody coming out and supporting it, and it was a really good event. So
And the next one is February, is that correct?
February 10th.
February 10th, okay.
Does anyone else have anything? Okay. Now on to the
Now info items. Sounds good. Thank you, Chair. So Sarah's got the first two, and then Darren will take the third one.
Good evening, Board. First information item is just we had our registration for our winter spring programs. In the first 2 weeks, we did over 2,400 registrations. Those are online, over the phone, in person. So really good numbers. Those are up a little bit from last year. And some of our biggest programs are youth tennis, swimming, skating lessons. And then our senior trips have become really popular again. We've been able, coming out of COVID now, to do trips. Some of them are overnight, some are day trips. So those are very popular. And then the second information item is we had our tree lighting at Ridgedale Commons, which is the first time we've had that. It was actually the only winterish type day in December 9th. It was actually quite windy. The event went really well, though. We had over 200 people there. We had a food truck. We had a candy cane hunt. People enjoyed hot chocolate, and there was a fire entertainer, and then the mayor said a few words and turned on the lights on the trees. If you haven't been out there, I believe it's 7 trees that are lit. Wasn't just one big tree, it was lighting several of the trees that are on site. So that went well. And I think I'll turn the next one over to Darren.
Yeah, so earlier in the year, last year, there was a few meetings held with the donation of the Timberline tennis court. So on December 5th, that closing was done for that property, and the donation was completed. Since winter hasn't gotten here yet, we had time to get out there and remove the fencing, remove the court and the gravel that was underneath it right away, just because we didn't have anything else to do. So that part is done. In the spring, we'll spread some soil on it and get it seeded, and then we'll just mow that area until that park is built. So we'll work this spring on developing a CIP page for that park, and that'll be one of the items that'll be brought to you, and we're working on the CIP as that future park.
Great.
Chair, would it make sense to, instead of putting turf grass, put some native seed mix, something that's slow growing?
For
then you wouldn't have to mow it.
I can jump in here. Those native seed mixes take several years to establish themselves. So by the time we're going to develop playgrounds or other park facilities, it would frankly just be easier to mow it, turf grass for a little while, and then do whatever appropriate plantings around that new facility that's going to get disturbed in the construction anyway.
So there's no, the equivalent of a green cover crop that's native?
Possibly, there's some no-mow fescues, like a no-mow grass that we could maybe look at, if that, that might be something we could do. And that generally only gets maybe 6-8 inches tall, and it's not. We don't violate our city mowing ordinance because we gotta.
Right.
Can't look. It is in the neighborhood. We want to make it look fairly presentable. So.
Right, but not having to go down there every other week and mow might be nice.
Yeah, it wouldn't be highly manicured. It would just be periodically mowed in that time, just to keep it under control.
Okay. If everyone's okay, moving on to the upcoming agenda items.
Yep, so upcoming meetings. So next meeting is February 7th. Both the February meeting and the March meeting, we will have the Purgatory Park Master Plan. So we'll get a draft review. Again, it's going to go out to the public here, hopefully mid to end of January. We'll have those results back here for the February, and then the final review would be in March. We're hoping to have a review of the outdoor rinks. The rinks are not open yet. I believe they started flooding this week. think. No, not yet. I think Hopkins started to flood one, I think, or two, but the weather has just not been cooperating. And Darren, I don't know if you have
We
any
put a
more.
little water down yesterday, just because it was cold in the morning, just to get some moisture there, even though we had 2 inches of rain the previous weekend. But looking at the weather, possibly might be able to get some colder weather towards the end of next week. So if we do, we'll try to see what the temperatures are. If we can hit it hard, we probably won't do every rink in town. We'll do maybe half to 3/4 of the ones that we normally do, just so we can focus on getting good ice in the ones that we can, because it'll be a short period of, a month or less that we'll have of a rink season if it stays cold, so.
Yeah, I think every city is in this predicament where the rinks are just, some aren't even doing it in the winter, this winter, so anyway. And then upcoming events, we currently have the Great Minnetonka Yeti Hunt is going on. That goes till January 7th, Big Willow Park. The fire department's holding Family Fun Day, Saturday, January 20th. Kids Fest will be back here at the Community Center on Sunday, February 4th. And then, as Corey mentioned, the second and I believe final winter market is Saturday, February 10th, also here at the Community Center.
Okay.
That's the upcoming schedule.
Fantastic. And we are in time to have a motion to adjourn. Anybody want to throw a motion out there?
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
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 All right.